Hello, I'm Archit Seshadri. You're watching Gravitas, the show that breaks down the big news of the day and offers you perspective. But first, here are the big discussions for tonight. Three states in the United States head for a recount of the presidential vote. Hillary Clinton supporters hang on with grim hope. President-elect Donald Trump calls Pakistan's Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and says he is a terrific guy. What is with the new warmth? And change is coming to the school curriculum in some Indian schools, including books like Harry Potter and Tintin joining the list. But can you judge a book by its cover? Welcome, everyone. Those stories in a moment, but first, our discussion starts with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. He's in the midst of filling up key positions in his cabinet. Now, while the world waits for the big inauguration day, January the 20th, when Trump officially assumes power, there is an interesting but a futile process happening on the sidelines. On Thursday, Wisconsin is likely to start recounting around 3 million votes that were cast in the U.S. elections in November. Pennsylvania and Michigan may also follow suit. Well, no one expects an overturn of the results, but die-hard Hillary Clinton fans are predictably asking, what if?
It was Donald Trump who warned he may not accept the election verdict should he end up losing. But nearly a month since that shock verdict, it's Trump who's defending it. But the recount call grew after the Green Party candidate Jill Stein initiated it, and the Hillary Clinton camp joined the push for a recount in the three key states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania and Michigan. But by all counts, it's a long shot. And here's why. Donald Trump leads Hillary Clinton by 22,177 votes in Wisconsin, 70,638 votes in Pennsylvania, and 10,704 votes in Michigan. The margins appear too big for Clinton to overcome. On the flip side, if the recount does overturn the results and Clinton bags all three states with 46 Electoral College votes, she conceivably could become the next US president, difficult though it seems. Here's what the three main actors have to say about the recount. Dr. Jill Stein, Green Party candidate, says, "I will do a recount in any state where the deadline has not passed." Donald Trump says, "Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead. So much time and money will be spent. Same result. Sad." Hillary Clinton was quoted as saying, "Clinton respectfully supports the issuance of an order requiring a manual recount of all ballots cast in the presidential election in Wisconsin." Historically, recounts were held only for 27 of the 4,867 statewide general elections between the years 2000 and 2015. But only 3 changed the final outcome. Incidentally, the Democrats were the beneficiaries of the recount. Any recounting process is expensive and complex. Officials will have to examine millions of paper ballots and the paper trails of the votes cast in touchscreen machines. The recounting process has to be completed by the 12th of December and certified by the 13th of December. The Electoral College then votes on the 19th of December. Trump's election was nothing short of dramatic. A recount would add another twist to it. Bureau Report, WION.
Well, to get perspective on this story, we go next to our guest, Michael Kugelman, joining us from Washington, D.C., a senior associate for the South Asia program. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate that. Let's sort of dive right in. A recount in some of the states in the United States. How surprising is this move by both the Democrats as well as the Green Party?
Well, in some ways, it's not that surprising, just because Hillary Clinton was so widely expected to win by so many people, and of course, when the final tallies came in, she had won the popular vote by a pretty significant figure. So I think that there was a desire to simply leave no stone unturned, so to speak, and do everything possible just to make sure that the election result that came out November 8th is really the election result that should stand. Now, in terms of Jill Stein's role, that's another question that's very interesting because, of course, she was a minor candidate. She placed very poorly. My sense is that she simply wanted to have some sort of role in this election. And she said publicly that she wanted this to be a fully transparent election, and that's why she's been taking the lead and why she raised the money for this recount. But I think that she was looking for an excuse or an opportunity to have some sort of prominent role in an election that she really didn't have any sort of significant role in the end.
Michael, staying with you, what about the irony of the situation? Trump, earlier we know he talked about if he didn't win, that he would say the election was rigged, and it's sort of an interesting twist of fate how things all lined up. Clinton didn't really talk about this until Jill Stein brought it up. How do we read into that? Do we think there could be any possible change when it comes to the actual president, or very unlikely?
As your reporter said, I think it's highly unlikely that the results will change. I mean, Trump would essentially, he leads by 100,000 votes combined in these 3 states that are going to have a recount. He would need, essentially, Clinton would need to win. The results would have to be overturned in all 3 states where there's going to be a recount in order for the Electoral College to then make the necessary moves that would allow Hillary Clinton to become president. Highly unlikely. I think that when you look over U.S. history, when there have been recounts, there's never been a case where the candidate that was losing ended up recovering as many as 100,000 votes. I think that the outcome could change, or the numbers could change just a bit, but not enough to allow Clinton to win all 3 of these states under recount. I doubt she'll even win one of them. And also, there's a very short time frame here. I mean, essentially everything has to be done in less than 3 weeks. So this won't necessarily be the most comprehensive approach. But of course, what's really ironic, you talk about our irony before, if the unexpected happens, and of course this has been an election that was very unexpected in so many ways. Right. If the unexpected happens and the result is overturned, Trump would, of course, launch a huge campaign to say that the recount shouldn't have happened, that it was corrupt, et cetera, et cetera. So that would lead to a tremendous unholy mess. But that would be very unlikely at any rate.
We're now going to get some perspective on our other guest who's joining us as well. Harinder Sekhan, a senior fellow with the Vivekananda International Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate that, ma'am. Let's get your perspective with regards to this recount in the United States. What do we make of this?
I don't think there's going to be any permanent or a different outcome, given the close margins and also, the wide electoral college difference is too much for Hillary Clinton to cover up. But it has been a very messy election campaign throughout. And one thought that the results of November 8 would be accepted and things would settle down. But maybe, Jill Stein felt that there was a very strong case for a recount, given that there was this ever-present Russian threat of the tapping into the Democratic Party networks. And now they feel that maybe there's been some kind of a discrepancy between the electronic voting machines and the number of people who actually came and voted. So it is messy, it is uncalled for, it is unfortunate that America, with a very healthy democratic experience, has to go through this murky experience that just continues without end. But I guess, to show that the democratic fundamentals have not been in any way compromised, this is a necessary process which one has to go through.
Michael, let me bring you back into the equation. What about this whole message about the Electoral College? How does this factor in now that we're seeing recounts happening in some of the states? A lot of people have criticized it, saying it's an archaic system. Should it be changed?
Yeah, I'm one of the people that has long advocated for some type of reform in terms of how elections are done and how the process works here, because this is the United States, clearly democracy, and yet you can have someone win the popular vote, as Hillary Clinton did, by a fairly large margin, and yet still not be the president. And that's because of the Electoral College, which is something that's been around for a very long time. Many Americans don't really know why it's there and why it's still there. I think it's very unlikely that there would actually be any sort of changes to phase it out. I think that when it comes to democratic institutions in this country, they tend to be long-standing, and there's rarely a desire to make major shifts. But certainly you have to wonder, and particularly many Democrats in this country are wondering if the Electoral College really no longer serves a purpose, and that it seems to suggest that it could have some anti-democratic tendencies, in the sense that it essentially defies the votes and the spirits of the public, in the sense that you could have someone win the majority of the votes and yet still not be president.
And again, another ironic twist of fate. We know that Trump has actually criticized the Electoral College. Again, things this time working out in his favor. Are you surprised, Michael, about the Hillary Clinton supporters who are still holding on to hope? Do they have any chance at this point? I mean, this was an election of surprises, so anything could happen. But how does it really look, though, for Clinton and her supporters at this point?
Well, I mean, let's face it, it's very unlikely that anything is going to change. And I would think that the majority of Hillary Clinton supporters have accepted the fact that even though there's going to be this recount, it's not necessarily going to change things on the ground. I think that there was a period of shock in this country for several days and indeed several weeks, and particularly from Clinton supporters. But I think at this point now they're just trying to move on. Certainly some of them do keep some hope that something could change in this case, but I think they accept that it simply is unlikely, and that this recount is really one last opportunity to at least give themselves a bit of hope, probably misplaced, that maybe something could change. But again, I think people in the Clinton campaign are trying to reassess, figure out what went wrong, and then ultimately simply move on.
Michael, another follow-up question to that. With regards to December 19, that's when the electors in the Electoral College vote. The 538, again, the candidate needs 270 to win. There's something called faithless electors, those who decide not to vote for the party that they pledged to vote for. Could that factor in this year? We've seen the anti-Trump protests. We've seen such bizarre reaction that typically doesn't follow a U.S. presidential election. Could they, by any chance, switch things around, which will ultimately mean the House of Representatives will have to cast the ballots for the president?
Yeah, this is certainly a scenario that's been bandied about, and I think there always is the possibility that you could have a few people that decide to do that. But I think it's so unlikely that there would be a critical mass of folks in the Electoral College who would actually choose not to put their vote forward, that it makes it very unlikely that it could actually change the situation on the ground. Sure, maybe a handful would act, but at the end of the day, I think it would be very unusual and very unlikely that you'd have more than one or two at the very most that would choose to exercise that right and simply not put their vote forward.
What type of message does this send, Michael, though, to our international community, to see the United States, a huge economic global power, and seeing the political process and this recount and just the surprise of Trump that many are calling, they didn't expect him to even be the nominee, let alone president, but all of that has happened. What does this show the world about the United States, especially in this year's election?
Well, I mean, above all, it does show the world that the United States is a democracy with strong democratic institutions, with peaceful transfers of power and all that comes with it. I mean, let's face it, when the shocking result was announced and Trump was declared the winner of the election, there was no opposition from the Hillary Clinton campaign. It was accepted, and as we discussed earlier, it was not the Hillary Clinton campaign that lobbied for this recount. It was Jill Stein. It was another party. Right. So I think that suggests that there's a desire to really adhere to the strong democratic process here. But certainly, I mean, the vote is a shock to the United States and to the world, and there's been so much discussion about this already. And as we know, this is reflecting a pattern where you've had, conservative populist leaders that have been coming to power in a number of countries across the world, particularly in Asia and in Europe. And the fact that it happened in the United States, though, is really an emphatic reminder about how voting patterns and how the currents of politics are just changing so much across the world, including in the United States. Let's bring Dr. Sekhon back into the conversation. Thanks again for continuing to talk to us.
What about this whole message from somebody who's outside of the United States, someone who's in India, observing this to see what's all happening in the United States? The election happened now. It's almost been a month. But still, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect with Americans. The Green Party, now even some of Clinton, her supporters saying that, yes, we do want the recount. What does that just show of the unity in this election?
He was asking me a question and it's gone.
Let me ask you the question again. The question to you, Dr. Sekhan. What does this show that there's a lack of unity in the United States? The fact that both two parties, the Green Party and the Democrats, are now supporting a recount in some of the states, Wisconsin, for example. I'm not sure if she can hear me, so we'll come back to you and check in with you in a bit. But let's go back to Michael. Michael, moving on, the cost of a recount. Certainly, that's going to play a huge factor. We heard Trump talk about that, saying the only reason that Jill Stein is even pushing for this is to raise funds. Another, perhaps a bold statement on his part. Stein coming back and saying she wants to show what democracy is about. Talk about the cost and the implications when a recount is involved.
Yeah, I think credit to Stein. I mean, despite what I said before about her simply wanting to get some attention and some prominence in an election where she otherwise didn't receive much prominence, she seems to want to ensure that this is democratic process, that the democratic process played out successfully, and so she was willing to put the money out there. Which is really extraordinary. This recount is not being funded by the Clinton campaign on the whole. It's being funded by the campaign of a presidential candidate who did very poorly.
About 1%, I think, a very small percentage of people even voting for Jill Stein.
Exactly. It's extraordinary. And again, she's probably hoping this will get her some more support and maybe some votes in another election. I mean, the Clinton campaign is going to be paying. I mean, it's apparent, as I understand it, it's going to be paying for a number of its lawyers to be present at some of the recount sites. So this is not totally being done by Jill Stein's party. But it really is ironic. And again, this goes back to what we were saying before. This has just been such an election of surprises and ironies and incongruities that here we are, where you have a surprising election victory, and then you have a recount that's led by the party that received barely 1% of the vote in the election, which again makes you wonder if there could be one or two more surprises in store before January 20th, when the next president is scheduled to take office.
Let's get back to Dr. Sekhan, back into the conversation. Hopefully you can hear us this time. Some quick last reaction about this whole process, especially from the international community on what's going on with the recount in the U.S.
It's interesting because I thought these things happened only in a country like India, where we have huge numbers. I mean, the number of our electorate is much more. And that it's happening in the United States is of interest to us for the very simple reason we do follow the American electoral process and who is going to come into office very closely. Who gets elected is important given the status of the state of US-India relations today. And though we enjoy a broad cross-party support from both the Republicans and the Democrats, but who actually occupies the White House becomes important when India is playing an important role and US-India relations are on an upward trajectory. Coming to the electoral process and the recounting of votes, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think the recount is going to alter the results in any significant manner, though Hillary Clinton has the popular vote by over, I think, 2 million votes. But I don't think, the numbers are very small. In Wisconsin, it is only about 20,000. The difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is 23,000. And given the past results of a recount, it's always just about a 2% swing either way. So I don't think it's going to alter, and it will be a very small difference between the actual counting, physical count, and what has been recorded in the electoral machines.
All right, thank you so much to both of our guests. Dr. Sekhan, we'll continue the conversation with you in just a moment for our next segment. Michael, thank you for your perspective. We appreciate your insights. We're going to take a quick short break and continue the conversation on the other side of Gravitas.